The sun hung high above the endless desert. Heat waves danced across the golden sand, making the horizon shimmer. Ramai wiped the sweat from his forehead and adjusted the scarf around his neck. He had spent many years walking through deserts, but the land still amazed him. The silence was heavy here. No sound of animals. Only the soft hiss of the wind. Ramai was not alone. 3 others worked beside him. Lena, his quiet but sharp-eyed assistant, knelt in the sand near a half-buried stone slab, brushing it with care. Beside her, Kareem and Bilal carried wooden crates, filled with tools. The dig site lay a short walk from the shadow of an old pyramid. This pyramid was smaller than the famous ones people visited, but Ramai believed it held something special. For weeks, the team had been removing sand from the pyramid's base, looking for an entrance. Many thought Ramai's idea was foolish. He had found no proof of hidden rooms here, only a strange story in an old scroll he had discovered in a museum archive. The scroll spoke of silent giants, guarding a sleeping secret beneath the sand. The morning passed slowly. The sun grew hotter. Ramai walked around the site, checking the marks on the ground where they had mapped the dig. His eyes caught something unusual. A large shape stuck out from the sand some distance away from the pyramid. At first, it looked like a natural rock, but its surface seemed too smooth. Ramai called to Lena. They walked to the spot together. He knelt and brushed away the sand. A pattern of carved lines appeared, cutting across the stone in a neat design. As they cleared more sand, the shape of a massive foot came into view. The toes were square, not human-like, and each had strange marks carved into it. "It is part of a statue," Lena said softly. They dug around the shape until a leg began to show. The leg was thick, like the trunk of a tree, but made of stone that shone faintly in the sun. It took hours to clear more of it, and by afternoon the statue's body was visible. It was a tall figure with broad shoulders and a helmet-like head. Its eyes were deep and dark, but the way they were carved made it seem as if the statue was looking right at them. Kareem and Bilal joined them, their faces showing both surprise and worry. They had seen many statues in their work, but this one felt different. Its shape was not like any statue from ancient Egypt they had studied. The markings on its body did not match any known language. Ramai placed his hand on the stone chest. It was warm. He thought it must be from the heat of the sun, but then he noticed something strange. The stone seemed to give a soft vibration, as if there was a slow heartbeat inside it. "We will camp here tonight," Ramai said. "I want to study this more." By evening, the sun dropped low, painting the desert in gold and orange. The pyramid's shadow stretched over the dig site. The team set up tents close to the statue. Ramai sat outside his tent, drawing the markings in his notebook. He could not match them with anything in his memory. The old scroll in the museum had mentioned silent giants and a song in the wind. He remembered those words now, and without thinking, he listened. The desert wind was stronger at night, but here it carried a strange sound. It was not the normal whistle of air moving through dunes. It was low and steady, almost like a soft hum. The sound seemed to grow louder when he sat near the statue. Lena came out of her tent with a lantern. "You hear it too," she said quietly. Ramai nodded. He felt a chill despite the warm air. They walked around the statue. From a certain angle, the carving on its chest looked like a circle surrounded by smaller lines. The design reminded Ramai of a sun with rays, but it also seemed like something mechanical, like gears in a machine. Later, after a simple meal, the team tried to sleep. The desert sky above was filled with stars. The wind had calmed, but the hum was still there. Ramai lay awake, thinking about the statue. He wondered if there were more like it buried under the sand. Just before midnight, he stepped outside his tent again. The moon was bright, casting silver light on the statue. That was when he thought he saw the eyes glimmer. At first, he believed it was a trick of the light, but then the glow grew stronger, faint and pale, as if the statue was slowly waking. He did not move. The glow lasted only a few seconds, then faded. The hum in the air softened too. Ramai looked toward the pyramid. The shadow of its tip seemed to point straight at the statue. He remembered the strange story in the scroll again, about giants who would watch until the right time came. Maybe this was one of them. He returned to his tent but could not sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning, as the sun rose, Ramai called the others to continue clearing the sand. They wanted to know if the statue's base connected to anything underground. Karim uncovered another surprise, a second statue, smaller than the first, but with the same design and markings. This one faced a different direction, as if guarding another part of the desert. Ramai stood between the two, imagining a whole circle of such guardians surrounding the pyramid long ago. He could not explain it yet, but he felt sure they were meant to protect something hidden, something important. The hum was still in the air, and Ramai began to wonder if it had always been there, waiting for someone to listen. The second day began with a strange stillness in the air. The desert was usually alive with the soft hiss of wind, but now the air felt heavy and unmoving. Even the sand seemed to lie flat, without the usual rippling patterns. Ramai noticed it. As soon as he stepped out of his tent, Lena was already awake, sitting on a rock and staring at the larger statue. "It looks different today," she said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes did not leave the stone figure. Ramai studied it closely. The statue's surface seemed cleaner, as if the desert dust had fallen away overnight. The strange markings along its legs were more visible. They looked deeper, more defined, almost as if someone had carved them again in the night. Karim and Bilal joined them after breakfast. They continued to remove sand around the statues, but the work felt slower. Every so often, the team would stop and glance toward the stone guardians. The hum they had heard before was stronger now. It was no longer only in the air. It could be felt through the ground. The sand under their feet seemed to carry the vibration. By late afternoon, the sky darkened without warning. A line of clouds stretched across the horizon, rolling toward them faster than any desert storm they had seen. The wind picked up suddenly, throwing sand into the air. "This is not normal," Karim said, holding on to the side of a crate to keep it from tipping. The storm arrived quickly, but instead of blowing in random swirls, the sand moved in a strange pattern. It circled the dig site in wide loops, never touching the statues. The team huddled close to the largest guardian for shelter, but Ramai noticed something odd. The wind pushed against them, yet the space around the statues remained almost calm, as if the storm could not cross an invisible wall. Lena shouted over the sound of the wind, "It's like they are protecting us." Ramai wanted to agree, but the thought that the statues were doing this made his skin prickle. The storm raged for nearly an hour. Sand stung their faces, but none of it piled at the statue's base. Instead, it was carried away, leaving the stone feet uncovered. When the storm passed, the air cleared quickly. The ground around the pyramid was smoother than before, almost as if the sand had been brushed away by careful hands. The team stood in silence, staring at the statues. That night, they stayed close to their tents. Ramai could not stop looking at the guardians. Under the pale light of the moon, the eyes of the larger statue began to glow again, this time more steadily. A faint white light pulsed inside the stone like the slow beat of a heart. "Do you see that?" Lena whispered as she stepped out of her tent. Ramai nodded. They watched together as the glow spread down the statue's body, tracing the carved markings with a soft light. The smaller statue began to glow too, though its light was weaker. Ramai walked closer. The hum in the air grew louder with each step. He reached out a hand but stopped just short of touching the glowing stone. It felt wrong to interrupt whatever was happening. The glow lasted several minutes before fading away. The hum remained, but softer now, almost hidden under the sound of the night wind. The next morning, Remy called the team together. He told them they needed to document everything carefully. They measured the exact positions of both statues and made detailed sketches of the carvings. Remy noticed that the markings seemed to form a repeating pattern, but the sequence was broken in places, as if parts of it were missing. Lena suggested that there might be more statues nearby, completing the pattern. If they could find them, the carvings might tell a full story. They decided to search the surrounding sand. Karim and Bilal used long rods to probe for buried stone, while Remy and Lena walked in wide circles around the pyramid. The desert stretched endlessly, but every so often, Remy thought he felt a faint vibration under his feet, like a deep drumbeat far below the surface. By midday, Lena called out. She had found another stone shape sticking out of the sand, this one much smaller than the others. It was a broken piece of what looked like a statue's arm, covered in the same strange carvings. The break was clean, almost too perfect for something so old. They brought the piece back to the site. Ramos studied the markings and saw that they matched perfectly with a missing section on the smaller statue's leg. It was as if the statues were once connected in some larger design. As the sun began to set, the air once again grew still. The team prepared for the night, but a quiet tension hung over them. Remy sat by the fire, thinking about the strange storm, the glowing eyes, and the broken piece of the guardian. He could not shake the feeling that something had been set in motion, something that could not be stopped. Later that night, he woke suddenly. The hum in the air was louder than ever, and his tent was glowing faintly inside. He stepped outside and froze. Both statues were lit from within, their eyes bright and unblinking. The sand around their feet was moving, swirling in slow, deliberate circles. The wind was calm, yet the sand obeyed some unseen force. Remy's heart pounded as he watched. The statues' heads turned slightly, facing the pyramid. The movement was slow but certain, as if they were aware of something inside the ancient structure. For a long moment, everything was silent except for the hum. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the glow faded. The statues returned to stillness. The sand settled flat again. Remy stood there, staring at them under the starlit sky. He knew now, without doubt, these were not ordinary statues. They were watching, waiting, and perhaps preparing for something. The question was what they were preparing for. Morning light crept across the desert, touching the pyramid with gold. The heat was gentle now, but Remy knew it would rise quickly. He sat outside his tent, staring at the statues as the rest of the team prepared for another day of digging. The memory of the statues moving in the night was still fresh in his mind. Lena joined him, carrying a notebook filled with sketches. She sat down quietly and showed him a drawing she had made. It was the larger guardian, with the lines of light they had seen traced along its carvings. She had also drawn the smaller guardian and the broken stone arm they had found. "Look at this," she said, pointing to the sketches. The markings on the guardian seemed to form part of a circle. If there are more statues, they might all connect in one large pattern. Remy nodded. "A pattern around the pyramid," he said slowly, "like a protective ring." They decided to focus their digging on the space between the two visible statues. Perhaps more could be uncovered there. Karim and Bilal worked with shovels, while Ramy and Lena brushed away the sand from anything that looked unnatural. By midday, the sun was fierce. Sweat ran down their backs, and the sand burned under their knees. Just as they were about to take a break, Karim's shovel struck something solid. They began clearing around it, revealing a section of stone wall. The surface was smooth and carved with the same strange markings as the statues. Excitement grew as more of the wall appeared. The markings formed a pattern that seemed to lead downward. Soon they found what looked like the outline of a doorway, though there was no visible handle or gap to open it. In the center of the door was a large, circular plate the size of a shield, with carvings spiraling outward from it. Ramai crouched in front of the plate. He could feel a faint warmth coming from it, even though it was in the shade. Without fully knowing why, he placed his hand on it. The hum in the air deepened instantly. The sound seemed to come from under the ground. Sand shifted around them, and Lena gasped as she pointed toward the guardians. Both statues had turned slightly, now facing the doorway. Bilal took a step back. This is not normal. We should not be touching things we do not understand. But Ramai was too focused on the plate. As he kept his hand there, he felt the stone under his palm begin to move. It was slow, almost like the turning of a massive gear deep inside the pyramid. The carvings on the plate began to glow faintly. A low vibration passed through the ground, strong enough to make the sand tremble. Then, with a deep grinding sound, the circular plate rotated, and the stone door slid to the side, revealing a dark passage leading down. The air that came out was cool and dry, carrying the smell of ancient dust. Ramai stepped closer, holding his lantern high. The walls inside the passage were covered with carvings that looked like stars, lines connecting them into strange shapes. Lena leaned in. "These are not the constellations we see today," she whispered. Ramai nodded. "They are from a different time, maybe from a different sky." They decided to enter the passage. The steps leading down were steep and narrow, forcing them to move slowly. The deeper they went, the cooler the air became. The hum followed them inside, as if the sound was part of the pyramid itself. After several minutes, the steps ended at a wide chamber. The walls here were smooth, with more star maps carved into them. In the center of the floor was a large stone table, perfectly round, with more carvings spiraling across its surface. On the far side of the chamber was another door, smaller than the first, but it too had a circular plate in its center. Above it, a carving showed the same guardian statues they had found outside, positioned around the pyramid with beams of light connecting them. Lena traced the carving with her fingers. "It's like they are part of some kind of system," she said. "They are not just decoration. They have a purpose." Ramai studied the table in the center of the room. The carvings on it seemed to form a map of the desert, but it also included strange lines that extended far beyond what he recognized. Some lines ended at star shapes, as if linking the land to the sky. Karim stood by the wall, running his hands over the carvings. "Whoever made this knew more than we do even today," he said quietly. They spent hours examining every detail of the chamber, making notes and sketches. But as the light from their lanterns flickered across the walls, Ramai began to notice something unsettling. The carved stars seemed to glow faintly when he stood in certain spots. It was not bright, but it was there, a soft shimmer deep inside the stone. The team finally decided to return to the surface before nightfall. The climb back up was harder than going down, and the moment they stepped outside, Ramai saw that the sun was already sinking toward the horizon. The guardians stood in their usual places, but there was a strange stillness about them now, as if they were waiting. The hum was steady, louder than before. Ramai looked back at the dark doorway in the pyramid side. Something told him that opening it had set events into motion. He did not know if that was good or bad, but he could not shake the feeling that the statues had been watching every moment. As night came, the desert grew quiet. The stars above seemed brighter than usual. Ramai lay in his tent, unable to sleep. The image of the hidden chamber stayed in his mind, the star maps, the carvings of the guardians, and the strange lines linking land and sky. He knew they had only just begun to uncover the truth, and he feared what might happen when they reached the end of it. The night air in the desert was cool, but the camp felt tense. Ramai sat outside his tent, staring at the statues in the moonlight. They stood exactly where they had been, silent and still. Yet he could not shake the memory of seeing them turn toward the hidden doorway earlier that day. Lena sat beside the fire, quietly flipping through her notes. Karim and Bilal were repairing a lantern, but their movements were slow, distracted by the presence of the guardians. The hum in the air had not stopped since they opened the hidden chamber. If anything, it was stronger now, deep enough to be felt in their bones. The hours passed slowly. The moon climbed higher, and the shadows stretched long across the sand. Ramai's eyes were heavy with sleep when something caught his attention. The larger guardian's eyes glowed faintly, just as they had before, but this time the light was brighter. "Lena," Ramai whispered. She turned, following his gaze. The glow grew stronger. Then, with a slow and deliberate motion, the guardian's head shifted, turning to face the pyramid. Sand slid from its shoulders as the stone moved. The smaller guardian began to move as well, tilting its head and straightening its posture. Karim stood up suddenly. "It is moving. It is really moving," he said. The four of them stepped back from the statues, their feet sinking into the soft sand. The movement was slow, almost too slow to believe at first, but the sound was clear, a deep grinding, like ancient stones sliding against itself. Then came the sound of the wind changing. It started as a whisper, then grew into a low rush, circling the camp in an invisible ring. The sand rose gently into the air, swirling in a pattern just like during the strange storm before, but this time there were no clouds in the sky. Ramai's heart pounded. He remembered the carving in the hidden chamber, the one showing the guardians standing in a circle, connected by beams of light. The guardian's eyes flashed once, bright enough to light the sand in front of them. Then they froze again, standing completely still. The swirling wind slowed and faded until the desert was silent once more. No one spoke for a long moment. Finally, Lena broke the silence. They were looking at the pyramid again. Why? Ramai thought about it. Whatever is inside the pyramid, they are guarding it. I think they are waiting for something. The next morning, the team worked quietly. None of them wanted to talk about what they had seen, yet their eyes kept drifting toward the guardians. Ramai decided they needed to explore more of the area around the pyramid. They split into two groups. Rami and Lena walked toward the north side, while Karim and Bill moved south. The desert was endless in every direction, but Ramai kept his eyes low, searching for any sign of stone beneath the sand. Hours passed under the hot sun before Rami noticed something. Far to the north, a dark shape broke the smooth horizon. It was low, barely rising above the dunes. They climbed toward it, the sand slipping under their feet. When they reached the top of the dune, Ramai's breath caught. Below them was another guardian, almost fully buried. Only the head and shoulders showed above the sand. Its face turned toward the pyramid, just like the others. Lena knelt beside it, brushing the sand from its carved helmet. "This one is different," she said. "The markings are more detailed, and look, there's damage here." A large crack ran down one side of the statue's head. Part of the carved markings were missing. It looked as if something powerful had struck it long ago. They marked the location and returned to camp. Karim and Bill had not found another guardian, but they had discovered deep grooves in the sand that seemed too straight to be natural. That night, Ramai sat near the fire, going over the details. 3 guardians were now confirmed, and the markings in the chamber suggested there were more. If they formed a full circle, it could explain the strange storms and patterns of wind. As the stars filled the sky, the hum returned to its strongest level yet. Ramai stood, scanning the desert. That was when it happened again. The guardians began to move. This time, it was not just their heads. The larger guardian lifted one foot and placed it down with a heavy thud that made the sand jump. The smaller guardian shifted too, stepping slightly to the side. The buried guardian in the distance turned its head slowly, even though most of its body was still under the sand. Lena gasped. They are not just watching. They are adjusting their positions. The movement stopped as suddenly as it began. The guardians stood silent, their glowing eyes fixed on the pyramid. The hum faded to a low whisper. Ramai stared at them for a long time, his mind racing. If the guardians could move, then they were more than just statues. They were machines, ancient but still alive in some way. And if they were adjusting their positions, something must be changing in the thing they were guarding. He thought of the carving in the chamber again, with beams of light connecting each guardian. What would happen when all of them aligned? That night, sleep was impossible. Every sound in the desert felt sharper. Every shift of wind carried weight. Remy kept looking at the pyramid, wondering if the answer to all this was hidden deep inside. Behind the second stone door they had not yet opened. He had a feeling that soon, the guardians would not just move, they would act. And when that happened, the desert would never be the same again. The next morning, the desert sky was clear and bright. The heat returned quickly, pressing down on the camp like a heavy blanket. But Remai's thoughts were not on the heat. All night, his mind had been turning over the movement of the guardians, the alignment of their positions, and the strange connection they seemed to share with the pyramid. He gathered the team after breakfast. We need to go back into the hidden chamber, he said. We missed something before. Those markings on the walls and the table are not just decoration. They are telling us what the guardians are for. Lena nodded, already packing her notebook. And lantern. Kareem and Bilal were less eager, but they followed without argument. They returned to the doorway in the pyramid side. The circular plate was still warm to the touch when Ramai placed his hand on it. The stone door slid aside. Again, with the same deep grinding sound, and the cool air of the passage flowed out to meet them inside. The darkness wrapped around them like a cloak. The hum from the surface seemed to echo through the walls, faint but constant. Their lanterns cast golden light on the carvings, and the shapes of the stars seemed to shimmer as before. This time, Ramai moved slowly, studying every detail. He traced the patterns of the constellations with his fingers. They were not the ones he knew from modern astronomy. Some of the star groups were familiar, but many others were wrong, or perhaps from a sky that had looked different in the distant past. Lena stopped at one part of the wall. Ramai, look here, she said, pointing to a section of the carvings. It was a circle with several smaller shapes around it. The smaller shapes each had lines connecting them to certain stars. The arrangement was not random, it looked like a network, with each smaller shape linked to the others. Ramai stared at it, his heart beating faster. These smaller shapes. They are the guardians, he said. And this circle in the center, it is the pyramid. They turned to the large stone table in the middle of the room. Its surface was a map, not only of the desert, but of a much wider area. Carved lines extended from the pyramid to points far beyond the desert's edge. Some of those lines ended at symbols of stars, while others ended at strange shapes that looked almost like ships or towers. Kareem leaned over the table. This is not just a map of the land. It is a map of the sky and the ground together. Lena added, it's like the guardians are connected to something far away, maybe even outside this world. Ramai's fingers followed one of the lines leading away from the pyramid. The line curved toward a cluster of stars at the edge of the carving. There was a symbol there that he did not recognize, a dark circle surrounded by jagged lines. Something about it felt wrong, as if it represented danger. Near the bottom of the table, a set of symbols were carved deeper than the rest. They seemed to form words, but in a language none of them knew. Even so, Ramai could sense their meaning. It spoke of the returning shadow and the chosen who awakened the stone. The hum in the air grew louder, as if reacting to their discovery. Ramai looked up, uneasy. "It is almost like the pyramid knows we are reading this," he said. "They decided to copy as much of the map as possible." Lena worked quickly, drawing each star group, each line, and each symbol. Ramai helped her mark the positions of the guardians in the network. The more they studied it, the more it seemed that the guardians' alignment was meant to point toward the cluster of stars on the edge of the carving, the same place marked by the dark circle symbol. After several hours, they stepped back outside. The sun was beginning to lower, casting long shadows across the sand. The guardians stood as still as before, but Ramai felt different looking at them now. He knew their placement was deliberate, their positions chosen for a purpose that reached far beyond guarding a tomb. That night, the desert sky was cloudless. Ramai lay on the sand near the camp, staring up at the stars. Lena joined him, holding her notebook. She pointed toward a faint cluster in the distance. "See those stars there?" she said. They matched the pattern on the map in the chamber. The one connected to the dark circle. Ramai followed her gaze. The stars were faint, but he recognized the shape. Something cold twisted in his stomach. Kareem, who had been listening quietly, spoke at last. "If that dark circle means danger, then maybe the guardians are here to protect against it. What if it is not from this world?" Dalil shook his head. "You are talking about things that do not exist." Ramai did not answer. He kept his eyes on the stars. In the back of his mind, he thought of the words carved deep into the table. The returning shadow. The chosen to awaken the stone. The hum in the air was steady now, as if the desert itself was waiting. And for the first time, Ramai wondered if the returning shadow was already on its way. The desert air was still when Ramai woke. The stars were fading, and the horizon was beginning to glow with the first light of dawn. He sat up and felt a strange heaviness in the air. It was not the heat. It was something unseen, yet present all around. Lena was already awake. She was sitting near the campfire ashes, with her notebook open. She looked troubled. "Ramai," she said quietly, "I saw something last night. A light in the sky. It moved too slowly to be a shooting star, and it was not a plane." Ramai's eyes narrowed. "Where did it go?" She pointed toward the east, toward the very cluster of stars they had marked on the map inside the pyramid. Kareem and Bilal soon joined them. Kareem rubbed his arms. "I had dreams again. The same voice as before. It said, 'The shadow comes with the dawn. The stone will rise.' I woke up and could not move for a moment." The four of them packed their things quickly and went toward the pyramid again. Ramai felt they did not have much time. The hum in the air was stronger now. It was as if the pyramid's walls were carrying a sound from deep inside the earth. When they reached the guardians, Ramai stopped. The nearest statue was no longer covered with as much sand as before. The wind had cleared its feet, and faint lines glowed on its stone surface. They were shaped like the same star patterns they had seen on the map. Lena touched the statue's arm. "It feels warm," she said in surprise. Bilal, "Step back. This is not right. Statues do not glow, and they do not warm up. We should leave." But Ramai walked forward. "If they are waking, we need to know why." They entered the pyramid again. The main tunnel seemed brighter than before, though no sunlight reached inside. The light came from the carvings themselves. The constellations on the walls were glowing faintly, like embers in the dark. When they reached the map chamber, the stone table was lit by thin lines of light that moved slowly across its surface. The lines connected the guardians to the pyramid, then out toward the star cluster in the east. Ramai studied the movement of the lines. "It is like the map is tracking something," he said. Lena nodded. "The lines from the guardians are brighter. Now, the lines to the dark circle in the sky are also brighter. Maybe the shadow is coming closer." Kareem was looking at the strained writing again. "This part here," he said slowly. "It changes. I could swear it is not the same as last time." They stood watching. The symbols on the stone shifted slightly, their shapes flowing like water until new words formed. Ramai could not read them in the normal way, but he understood them. They said, "3 days until the stone awakens. Prepare the watch." The sound in the air deepened, almost like the beat of a slow drum. It echoed in their chests. They left the chamber and stood outside again. The sky had brightened, but in the east, a faint dark shape was visible just above the horizon. It was not a cloud. It seemed too sharp, too solid. Lena shaded her eyes. That was not there yesterday. As they watched, the dark shape grew a little larger. They decided to climb a tall dune for a better view. From there, they could see far across the desert. The dark shape was like a wall of shadow moving slowly toward them. Behind it, the light of the sun was dimmed, as though something massive blocked it. Ramai felt the weight of the moment. That is the returning shadow. Kareem looked at the guardians below. If they are meant to protect against it, maybe they will move when it arrives. The rest of the day passed in tense silence. The shadow in the east did not vanish. It grew taller and darker, but it moved very slowly, as if time itself worked differently for it. That night, they stayed near the pyramid instead of the camp. None of them wanted to be far from the guardians now. Just before midnight, Ramai heard a deep grinding sound. He woke the others. They followed the sound and saw one of the guardians shift slightly. Its head turned a fraction toward the east. The glowing patterns on its surface were brighter now, lighting the sand around it. Lena's voice shook. "They really are waking." More grinding sounds came from the others. Across the desert, lines of guardians were stirring, turning to face the same direction. The hum in the ground grew steady and strong, like the slow heartbeat of something vast. Ramai felt no fear now, only certainty. "When the shadow reaches this place," he said, "the stone will rise, and the guardians will act. We must be ready to see it." They sat on the sand, watching as the statues slowly came alive, one by one, preparing for something none of them could yet understand. The next morning, the desert felt different. The air was heavy and warm even before the sun had risen fully. Ramai stood on top of the dune and looked toward the east. The shadow was much closer now. It was so large it seemed to touch both the ground and the sky. The horizon behind it was hidden as though night had returned in that single place. Lena joined him and spoke in a quiet voice. "It will reach us before sunset." Down below, the guardians stood like a silent army. More of them had cleared themselves from the sand during the night. The glowing patterns on their stone bodies were brighter and pulsed slowly, as though they were breathing. Kareem and Bilal prepared their bags. None of them knew what would happen when the shadow arrived, but they felt they had to stay. Leaving now would mean losing the chance to understand the mystery that had been hidden for thousands of years. By noon, the shadow was close enough that they could see strange movement inside it. It was not a single solid wall, but a mass of shapes swirling slowly. The shapes looked almost like stones floating in the air, but each one shone faintly with its own light. Ramai's thoughts returned to the writing in the pyramid. 3 days until the stone awakens. Prepare the watch. He looked at the guardians again and understood. The watch was here. The stone must be somewhere inside that moving darkness. The ground began to shake gently. The sound was deep and steady like a drumbeat coming from below the earth. The guardians turned their heads slightly and faced the shadow. Then their arms moved. The grinding of stone filled the desert as hundreds of ancient statues came to life at the same time. Each guardian lifted its arms and pointed toward the sky above the shadow. Beams of pale light shot upward from their hands and connected high above. Slowly, the beams formed a great pattern in the sky. It was the same star map they had seen in the pyramid, but now drawn in light across the day. The shadow paused as if it sensed the guardian's action. Then from within it a massive form began to rise. It was a single black stone shaped like a perfect sphere. Its surface reflected no light. It was so large it seemed impossible that it could move at all, yet it floated higher and higher above. The desert Lena gripped Ramai's arm. That must be the stone. As the stone rose, the pattern of light in the sky shifted and connected to it. The beams from the guardians locked onto the stone's surface. The hum grew louder until it filled every part of the air and ground. Kareem's voice shook. It is not attacking us. It is reacting. Maybe this is not a battle. Maybe it is something else. The sphere pulsed once, sending a wave of light outward. When the wave touched the sand, the grains shone like tiny stars. The light ran across the desert toward the horizon. The shadow began to thin, breaking apart into smaller pieces that drifted upward into the sky and vanished. Slowly, the sphere lowered until it hovered just above the largest guardian in front of the pyramid. The grinding of stone began again. The guardian raised its hands higher, and the sphere sank between them. The glowing patterns on the guardian's surface flared brighter than ever before. The hum became a deep single tone that seemed to carry far beyond the desert. Then, without warning, the light from all the guardians and the sphere shot upward in one great column. It rose past the clouds and into the dark sky beyond. Ramai felt as if the earth itself had exhaled. When the light faded, the sphere was gone. The shadow was gone. The guardians stood still once more, their patterns dimming until they were only plain stone again. Silence returned to the desert. Lena broke it with a whisper. It was not a weapon. It was a signal. Ramai nodded slowly. The stone was never meant to destroy. It was meant to call or to warn. They explored the area for hours, but found nothing more. The pyramid's carvings had lost their glow, and the map was dark again. It seemed the event was over. The guardians had returned to their ancient watch and would wait again until the shadow returned. That evening, as the four of them prepared to leave, Ramai looked back at the endless line of statues. The setting sun cast long shadows behind them, stretching far into the desert. He knew they would never forget what they had seen. The true meaning of the guardians might not be fully understood for many years, but now the world would know there was something ancient and powerful buried in the sands of history. Something that had once awakened for a single day to meet a shadow from beyond the stars. As the wind rose and the sand began to drift again, the guardians stood silent, watching the horizon, waiting for the time they would be needed once more.